Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Your Spiritual Journey. This is Dr. Bob, and this is the space and the place where we talk about things important to your soul. As always, we ask you to like us, subscribe, and maybe even support us on Patreon. All of that helps to keep us on the air. So today's guest is no stranger to this program. This is actually the third time we'll have had Patty DeMarco on Your Spiritual Journey. Way back in 2023, in January, she was our very third episode of this podcast. She came back in May of 2024 when another one of her books came out. And here she is again. Patty is now the mayor of the Borough of Forest Hills. She's a Pittsburgh author with a doctorate in biology from the University of Pittsburgh. She has had a 50-year career in energy and environmental policy in both private and public sector positions. She writes and lectures in the fields of sustainability, energy, and environmental policy, and natural history. She learned her craft in public policy from Connecticut Governor Ella T. Grasso, for whom she served as policy advisor to the National Governors Association low-level nuclear waste compact negotiations, and liaison to the Connecticut Energy Advisory Board. She served as executive director of the Connecticut Power Facilities Evaluation Council. She worked in the utility industry as demand-side manager for the Connecticut Municipal Electric Energy Cooperative, and she served as a commissioner of the Regulated Utilities Commission of Alaska. She returned to Pittsburgh in 2006 and served as executive director of the Rachel Carson Homestead Association, and then as director of the Rachel Carson Institute at Chatham University, where she now holds an appointment as senior scholar and adjunct faculty. She sits as chair of the Board of Trustees for Phipps Conservatory and Botanical Gardens, and as the board member of the Mon Metro Chamber of Commerce. And I'd like to say pleasantly that she's also a past president of the Rotary Club of the Forest Hills, of which I am a member.
Yes.
With all that, Patty, I'm going to ask you to very briefly remind us of your spiritual journey, because I know we've covered that before in past episodes, but just a short cliff notes of your love of trees and nature and all of that, and then we'll get into some of the new things that you're into. So.
Thank you, Bob. Thank you. It's always a pleasure to be with you every Wednesday morning at 7 Rotary meetings. But my spiritual journey is a complex one. As you know, I was raised Catholic, married a Methodist, recovering from the institutions of church because they were inconsistent with my own personal belief in the living earth and the spirit of the living earth that is in all of us across denominations and across cultures, genders, even politics. So I'm probably closest to an animist, if they're still defined as such. But the Cathedral of the Trees is still my most happy worship space. And I do meditate every day. I do walking meditation. I do nature reflection as a part of my own personal practice, which keeps me grounded. And I really am privileged to live in the shadow or the embrace of my living trees, the 2 pin oaks that are over 100 years old that grace my property for which I am a steward. And they are really a healing presence. If you connect to the space where the roots are below you and the canopy is above you, you can actually feel the energy of the earth pass through that space. So that's my spiritual journey. And I am a firm believer in the healing power of nature, food as medicine, nature as a sustenance when you're in despair over the news, which I don't listen to but once a week because I can't bear it. But you can always find the confidence that nature has survived and will survive long after we have perished from our own folly.
Yeah. Yeah, that's something. And science has been showing us more and more the nature of trees and what they do for us and how they talk to us as well
And to each
as
other.
listen to us. And it's up to us to just listen more closely to get those messages.
Yep. Yeah.
So there are a couple reasons why I wanted to have you back on the program. I know that the last two times you were here, we talked about these two books that are here on display on YouTube. You have since written another book,
Edited, yes.
which is more of a textbook.
Yes.
But maybe you could talk about that a little bit and,
Okay.
and why you felt the need to write that particular book and how it's used now.
Yeah. You're talking about Reimagine Appalachia, healing the land and empowering the people. And this was a process that started in really the end of 2018 and proceeded for 2 or 3 years to come to a blueprint for rebuilding America from the bottom up. And it really was about Appalachia. And it started as a response for the people of the Ohio River Valley who saw the $6 billion in tax subsidies and promotions for the Shell petrochemical plant and the plan to have 5 more of the same down the Ohio River Valley and to have that be the plastic center of the future because New Orleans is becoming compromised by hurricanes and so on. A lot of people didn't like that future.
Yeah.
And we started saying, if we gave your community $6 billion, what would you do with it instead? And we went to the coal mine communities and to the places where it had been disinvested for 50 years or more, where the steel mills had been. And we had to go on to Zoom because of the COVID outbreak. We did 45 listening sessions on Zoom, had over 1,000 people participate from 4 states, Ohio, West Virginia, Pennsylvania, Kentucky, to talk about what is the future of Appalachia and what can we do if we were empowered to take our own fate into our hands. And the ideas were amazing and wonderful. And a lot of them centered around healing the damage of the past. I mean, the Mine Reclamation Act of 1977 did not touch the places that had been mined before that time. So the high walls, the strip mine places, the places that were reseeded with the grass, picture taken, and then the next rain it all washed off, leaving the rock. These places provide job opportunities for the people who mined the coal because those skills of reshaping the land and restoring the soil are the same skills that they used for mining, but it would be restorative, regenerative instead of extractive. And that concept of a regenerative economy, one that is based on healing the earth and empowering the people to take their own fate in their hands, and doing the resources of government into places that invest in people, that invests in building communities, and that invests in creating a future that can be sustained. That concept was what came out of the Reimagine Appalachia process, and it was from listening to the people.
Yeah.
And the other exciting piece about this book, and the reason I felt it needed to be recorded, is that those issue papers were fed into the Congress at the time when they were looking at Build Back Better.
Oh,
So
wow.
we kept the staff members of the Congress representatives, the senators and the House of Representatives from all those 4 states and several others in the loop. We invited them to our listening sessions. We invited them to our working groups. We sent them our papers. We went to testify. And a lot of the ideas of the Reimagine Appalachia blueprint were actually incorporated into the law. So the community change grants, the infrastructure, the CHIPS grant, all these things had elements that came from Reimagine Appalachia blueprint. And to me, to come from grassroots to law in 2 years never happens, almost never, but it happened. And it was working. It took a long time to get the mechanics of grant distribution and refocusing the government to diversity, equity, and inclusion because we had to rebuild so much from the prior administration. But it was actually moving money into places that had not been invested for 50 years.
Yeah.
And having people see, oh, when we come together to see what a community benefit should look like when a factory moves into town, people talk to each other. They share ideas. They identify what would make them thrive. And that is what we captured. So I felt it needed to be documented. And so this book was not just the issue papers, which are still on their website, but the process that we went through, the motivation, and the results.
Yeah.
And to me, this is a model of democracy in action as it was intended. Talking to the people first, listening to their ideas, reflecting back and grouping together, acquiring and applying expertise. So we had an economist research out what would be the job impact if this blueprint were adopted. And it's phenomenal. I mean, more than 500,000 jobs across those 4 states alone. And many of them have been realized in the places where the funding was delivered before it was clawed back by the Congressional Review Act. It, to me, was a spark of hope in times where people were feeling frustrated and denied the opportunity to go forward.
Yeah. So what happened to all those plastic plants that were going to be built?
Well, 3 of them disappeared immediately because the economics didn't play out. And the 4th one that was built is now for sale. It has not complied with any of its emissions requirements since the day it began operating. And the property values in the vicinity have declined. The population has declined. And they have not hired as many workers as were promised.
Yeah.
So all the things that those who were advocating against it predicted, unfortunately, have come true. And the money, of course, taxpayer money, has disappeared into the pockets of the corporations, and we'll never see it again. So to me, I look at the next wave, the next big thing,
Yes.
the data center stuff, and okay, there will be construction jobs, but they're not a lot of permanent jobs. And the damage that's done to the environment and to the surrounding communities is not accounted for in the cost estimates that they produce. We never learn. We keep looking for the next 1,000 employer things. I look at the Braddock, East Pittsburgh, North Braddock plan, the Bend plan in the Mon Valley. They say, okay, yeah, right, it would be lovely to have 1,000 employer come back. But we have these entrepreneurs here. Let's see if we can help them be stable and grow. Okay, you have a 3-person shop. They now have a 30-year lease, and they've hired 6 people. This is really cool. Let's do that again. Let's refurbish the buildings that there are and make them habitations, make them business spaces, make them incubators so people will want to be there. It's working. It's slow. It would benefit a lot from the community change grant that might have funded a lot of this. It would benefit a lot from things like $6 billion of tax incentives and investment credits and things of that nature, capital for investing in buildings and investing in people. But it will come slowly, and it will work. And I think regenerating belief in the entrepreneurial spirit, in the confidence that people given support of their community will know. You have a long list of things. We'd like a laundromat. We'd like a place for kids to play. We'd like, a place where you can shop locally for things. We'd like to have a place where we can sell things we make. These are possible. These are things that can happen. They don't need a lot of money. They need some money.
Mhm.
They need the support of their community. They need a space to be. These are not unreachable. These are not undoable. And we just have to keep moving in that direction and keep pushing the policy in the direction of investing in local communities. Build the tax base a little bit at a time instead of thinking lots of taxpayer dollars to attract this big employer. Well, the people who work in some of those big places don't live in the communities where they're located. So the money leaves. If you employ people who live there in the communities where they're working, the money stays in that economy, stays locally, and it refreshes and renews and rejuvenates the communities where they are. That was the American way for a long, long time. And the Industrial Revolution that made all of these conveniences happen, how many of them are really essential?
Right.
I do this exercise with my class when I was teaching about, name 10 things that you could absolutely do without.
Mm-hmm.
Those little things you insert in your toilet paper thing to make the bathroom smell like flowers. Does anybody really need those? Do you realize how toxic they are? You can start there. There are like hundreds of things that we all have gotten used to that we don't really need,
So a little while ago, at one of our Rotary meetings, you had to miss because you had to go to Europe to deliver a presentation. So could you talk a little bit about, one, what was the basis for that presentation?
Yeah.
And two, how it was received by your European audience?
Okay, well, there were two things. First of all, I wrote a chapter in Reimagine Appalachia on regenerative agriculture, and I was speaking about that at this conference. It's an international climate conference where people from all over the country come to share their ideas, and you meet amazing people in a place like this. It was one of those things where the speakers come together and then the audience is broadcast. It's, an international audience that isn't in the room. But the speakers, there were 80 presenters over the course of 3 days. And you get to share perspectives on all kinds of things. And I had a chance to talk to people from Sweden who, oh my goodness, I forget his name now. I should have brought the program. But he talked about the regenerative agriculture, which has been a tradition in Sweden forever, and the practice of restoring fertility of the land and the absolute importance of maintaining the ecosystem services of the living earth that we depend on for fresh air, clean water, fertile ground, and all the biodiversity of species that support the web of life of which we are one part. If you can restore and sustain those living systems, the earth self-regulates and perpetuates this equilibrium that has been in place since the Pleistocene era, and that is what is our life support system.
Yeah.
We're systematically destroying it, and to talk, if you talk about agrivoltaics here in this country, the farmers get all upset. Oh, it's taking farmland and it's making, well, no, it just gives you a way to create energy in the space where you grow things. So in Germany, they have windmills along the edges of the farms, especially along the edge where the train runs, because when the train goes by, they spin faster. And, you have bifacial solar down the middle of all the highways. You have them on top of the railway stations, on top of all the buildings. And you design systems to work with the renewable energy system instead of, with a power plant. And there's no technological impediment to doing this,
Mhm.
And I know even in this country now, especially after the Inflation Reduction Act benefits, where they put in so much solar? In the ranches of Texas and Colorado and Arizona and Indiana and Illinois, because the farmers saw it as a second income. They didn't put it where it interfered with the crops. They put it on the edges. They put it on the hedgerows. Sometimes they put it to shade things that grew better in the shade than in the baking sun.
Yeah.
And this is becoming more and more accepted. It gives a second revenue stream to the farmers. It provides some of their energy, even for irrigation. And it also doesn't interfere with the productivity of the farm. So if you talk about this in Pennsylvania, you get vastly much more negative response. Oh, we're going to pave everything. No, you don't have to pave everything to put in solar.
Yeah.
You can put it in ways that are symbiotic. But it takes a long time to change people's attitude. And going to Europe and seeing and talking to people from India and South America, where they have basically skipped some of what we've done here and just gone directly to a renewable system for communications and for water production and for energy production. It's sort of exciting to see happen,
Yeah. Well, that was quite an adventure.
It was. It was also an adventure because I went to Italy for the first time, and I didn't get to go to the place where my family had come from because it was just too logistically challenging to get there from where we were in Milan. But we did go to some of the old villages around Lake Como, and when you walk on streets where the footsteps have worn grooves in the road or grooves in the steps over thousands of years, and where people tell you, oh, yes, for 10 generations, we've raised lavender and goats in these hills. I mean, we have not been here 10 generations in this country. You see places where you walk into a shop and there are 5 generations of people tending the shop. The 5-year-old who greets you at the door, her mother on the phone at the desk, and her grandmother crocheting in the corner, making lace, which is on some of the things that they sell. It's just a different pace of life and a different frame of time than we are used to. We're always in a hurry. We don't respect things that are old. I'm getting old, so I know that.
So I'm curious, having grown up as you have, because I'm just one day older than you are. When I went to school, we learned about crop rotation, and that was a way to do sustainable farming. Is that not being done any longer? Or
if you drive or fly over our country in the middle of the plains states, you can see from horizon to horizon nothing but cornfields or soy fields or whatever it is they're growing. We went to monocrop market cultures that were consolidating those small farms into big agricultural production systems that depend on fertilizer and pesticides and herbicides, and more recently genetically modified or crops that can be harvested all at one time by spraying them with glyphosate so they ripen all at once. Part of this was after the Second World War, when all of the energy and effort that went into creating munitions, petrochemical derived, were turned to creating plastic and petrochemicals, fertilizer, herbicide, pesticide, and things that were chemically derived. And this replaced the more small scale, more human scale even, crop rotation where you had 40 acres and every 10 acres would rotate around and you'd leave one fallow. You would plow under your cover crop. You would use the manure of one field to fertilize the next year's crop. These practices were considered uneconomic. They weren't scalable, they thought. And they didn't allow for concentration of markets onto things that were market producing, like we export grain, we export corn, we export cattle feed. We feed a lot of what is grown in this country feeds animals, not people. And so we moved up the food chain to become more carnivores and more processed food consumers as convenience. Yeah. But what we've lost is the connection to the land and the connection to food that is locally diverse. So you can get strawberries in January. They weren't grown anywhere close. They're probably from Chile or California or Florida. You can get oranges all year round. You can get blueberries all year round. They usually came in July or August. Strawberries were in May. Peaches were in you lost the seasonal diversity of regions for both food and products. You could walk into a mall anywhere in the country and not know what city you're in. Right?
Yeah, that's true.
And that was the scaling up, the market optimization. And to me, everything is measured in dollars and more so. Yeah. But you need to balance not just the economy, and definitely you need to be economically viable, but you also need to preserve the environment that is our life support system and the base for our health. And you need to support the cultural and historical and human part, the humanities, the culture. Mm-hmm. That is what makes us people as opposed to just animals. And to me, unless we rebalance that triad, so that the economy and the environment and the culture are balanced, we have been impoverished by just seeking dollars. And a dollar as a goal, you can't eat money. You can't eat a lot of the stuff. You can't breathe money. Yeah. And when you made corporations persons, corporations don't have children. They don't breathe. They don't bleed. No. They don't eat. They only make money. And that's all fine and wonderful. The stock market is soaring. We're making money. But children are going hungry in this country. And to the point that even in communities like where we live, there are too many children that go home hungry on the weekends during the school year. All summer, who's going to feed these kids? And I know we volunteer at the food bank. The line goes around the corner. People come in there apologetic and frightened. They've never been to a food bank before because they can't make ends meet. This, to me, is not okay in America. Yeah. People should not go bankrupt because they can't pay for their medical care. They shouldn't have to choose between food and medicine. And, a chain is only as strong as its weakest link, and a country is only as strong as the least among us. If we can't take care of the elderly and the children and the infirm and the veterans, we aren't a great country. And it isn't okay in America for those things to be cast aside as inefficient, uneconomic, unaffordable. Excuse me, what is the point of having a country if you can't support the health of your children and your people?
Yeah, there's a 4th of July message that you put on your website. And I do want to say that there is so much good on your website. And
thank you.
It's just patriciademarco.com.
Yep.
And you'll find some of the best information about sustainability anywhere on that website.
Oh, thank you.
So, well, I remember Pathways to Our Sustainable Future which really highlighted everything that Pittsburgh is doing towards sustainability and this Western Pennsylvania region. And, that was a book that really garnered a lot of attention. And it kind of put Pittsburgh on the map internationally.
I don't know about that.
So to me, that's a foundation of who Patricia DeMarco is. What's in that book is still true.
Yeah, well, it's all more true because almost all of the businesses that I wrote about in those 23 case studies have amplified into wildly successful operations. Even Windstacks, where Ron Godovic died in a motorcycle accident. His brother has taken up the company and it's still growing. And the concept of renewable energy supported by long-duration storage batteries with EOS Energy and now several other battery companies, it's become the solution, to the argument, well, what do you do when the sun goes down? Well, I'm sorry, the battery works just fine, and it works for a long time. And, you have a way to design a power system that is modular instead of central dispatched. The problem is that the infrastructure of regulations is not designed for a distributed energy system. It's designed for a central dispatch system with one-way traffic from the generator to the customers.
Right.
And what you have now is buildings that operate as power plants and people who generate power in their businesses' locations. And you have two-way traffic in a system where the rules are written for one-way traffic. We have to fix this. This is not a technical problem. In Germany, they do it routinely. 2-mile circle microgrids are interconnected with software designed for two-way traffic to optimize load and demand on an instantaneous basis. We have hundreds of people sitting around here writing software on a daily basis. Surely we can solve this problem. This is not a technical problem.
Yeah.
This is a regulatory problem. And regulatory problems can be fixed by a change in law if we have the political will to do it.
Yeah.
And I think what I hope to do and what FIPS has been doing with the toolkit that they've done, and Richard was presenting in October in Milan as well, Richard Piagentini of FIPS. The climate toolkit has now been adopted by 240 institutions around the world and 40 nonprofit organizations just in Pittsburgh. It's free and it's on the FIPS website. And it helps people organize their climate response with a toolkit of practical, affordable, doable things that move from an extractive idea of how we exist on this planet to a regenerative idea where we can restore the resources that are our life support system even as we thrive forward.
So that's called the Climate Toolkit.
The Climate Toolkit. Yep.
And how does somebody access that again?
You just go onto the FIPS website.
The FIPS Conservatory
yes,
website.
FIPSconservatory.org. And you look under Climate Toolkit, and it's right there.
Okay.
And it's available to anybody.
Sounds pretty easy.
Yep.
So what was it that made you feel the need to publish this, I'd call it a manifesto, America, A Perspective on 250 Years. And you published that on July 4th.
Yes, I did. I was supposed to give a speech on July 4th at the community day, but it was so hot and the audience was not in the mood to hear a long speech. So I decided to just write it and post it instead of reading it. But I felt like, 250 years is a quarter of a millennium. And it's a good time to take a look back and also forward. And looking back, I realized very acutely that we were all immigrants here, except for the indigenous peoples who had been here for thousands of years. Thousands. 250 years is a blink of an eye in the arc of time. And we had colonists arrive here as adventurers, explorers, with that curiosity, that initiative to find something new and better, they did not realize that they were walking into a permaculture, into a civilization that had been organized across numerous tribes from southern Canada all the way to the middle of South America under the Iroquois Nation, the Iroquois Confederation. Thomas Jefferson took the concept of multiple states under one federal control from the Iroquois Nation and from the Sioux. And to me, we forget that. There is a great deal in our culture that we did borrow from the people who were here that we don't acknowledge and recognize, and are only now beginning to value. The whole concept of stewardship of the earth as part of your responsibility as a governed people. The whole concept of governing by consent of the governed and agreeing that we all have dignity and rights that are shared, and that shared prosperity is more valuable than a few very wealthy people who wear robes and crowns, which was what they fled. They left the monarchy to create something where you all had an opportunity to thrive. We need to remember that. That is the foundation and the heart of what made America in the first place. And that is what we can get to again if we just remember that the power of the people is vested in the people, and that a shared prosperity is a true prosperity that can be sustained indefinitely if you restore the land and empower the people. And I think the concept that everyone has value, regardless of their standing and their income, is one that we need to remember. And you talk about a spiritual journey, that is the essence of it, that we are all worthy. We are all worthy as individuals, and we all deserve to be treated with respect, even if we don't have anything but rags, And to me, that's the heart of what makes America, is the thought that you could come here with nothing as an immigrant and a great idea and work hard and make your life better for your children.
So that was your grandfather's story?
That was, yes.
Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Angelo DeMarco. He was born in 1891. He fled the reunification of Italy because his town was left in a little village up in the mountains. The southern part of his community went to Molise, which had all the support of the government. Most of his town left at that time, and many of them came to Pittsburgh. And they worked in the mines and they worked in the mills, but he was a skilled stonecutter. So he worked for the railroad. And you know these cobblestone streets? Cobblestone rail beds? People like my grandfather cut the stone and laid it and kept it. And he built a family here. He had sold his land to his next youngest brother, because under the laws of primogeniture, the oldest son gets half. The next son gets a quarter. That was him. And then the next two brothers shared the eighth. So he gave his quarter to his younger brothers and came here. And so he didn't come with nothing. And he brought, I don't know, there were at one time 7 people living in their house. When I lived upstairs, I was born in that house, and I lived on the top floor with my parents and my little brother until I was 5 years old. And we had a quarter of an acre. And it was planted edge to edge with vegetables and flowers and fruit. The fruit trees along the border, the grapes grew up to the second floor. The fig tree, white figs and red figs, which he had brought as bare root in his vest pocket from the old country. And I still have the fig tree from the cuttings, and so does my brother, and so does my sister, and so do my cousins, because that was propagated. And that culture of care for the land took the Pittsburgh slate clay soil and turned it into something amazing that fed us for 50 years. You know, we didn't know we were poor because we ate, beautifully well for all that time. Illegal chickens under the porch, And the whole street was like that. All the
Yeah.
little Italian farms, except for Mr. Stang and Mr. Shaw, had backyards where the chamomile grew as weeds and the chicory. But we all farmed. All the kids were conscripted labor for the summer, canning and weeding and taking care of things. And it was a great way to grow up because
Mhm.
you were connected to the land. And all the skills that I ever needed as a biologist later, I learned from my grandmother, from my nonna. Which are the good bugs, which are the bad bugs? Which are the flowers that become zucchinis, and which ones can you fry?
Yeah.
How do you make sure the corn has enough filled, because you've got to make sure the pollen is spread. And, all of those little things that you learn to observe when you're
Mhm.
in a garden that needs care become skills over your life that last forever.
Yeah. Well, we talk about roots. That's where your roots are,
That's where
and
they run deep.
look what they grew. So my spiritual interviews on this podcast and the people who have written books and I've discussed things with are very concerned that, in fact, they're not just concerned, they know that we cannot live the way we're living and sustain humanity
Mm-hmm.
in the direction that we're going.
Mm-hmm.
That if we don't change directions, there will be no humanity in the future because the earth cannot sustain what we continue to destroy. And that isn't just with the land. Our economy isn't sustainable the way that it's going. Our very lives, what we depend on, the sun and climate change and all of that is destined to come crashing down.
Mm-hmm.
And the phoenix that's going to rise out of the ashes of that destruction is predicted to be the world that you envisioned trying to create now.
Well, there's no need for us to crash into destruction.
Yeah.
The IPCC did a report on what it would look like if we have a total of 4 degrees centigrade raise in the average global temperature. They published it, I think, maybe 3 or 4 years ago. I went to the climate hearing that the state of Pennsylvania held a couple of weeks back, and their biggest emissions reduction was for shifting from coal completely to natural gas by 2050. And that would leave you still with 30% fossil fuel dependence by 2050.
Yeah.
And they argued that this would only be a 6-degree increase in the temperature. It would be like Arkansas. I banged my head on the table. I was so frustrated. And the lady who was presenting said, "Well, Patty, that's just reality." And I said, "It's only reality if we let it be reality, because that reality is hell. And that is a reality that would have no humans living in it, and life will not be anything like we know it now. The laws of nature are not negotiable at all. Physics, atmospheric chemistry, the biologic system's responses to changes in the environment, these are not things we control. We cannot legislate them. We cannot rescind them.
Yeah.
We cannot ignore them by not collecting data. All we can do is recognize that it has taken centuries to understand even the fundamental things about the nature of elements. Think of all the alchemists who tried to find out how to make lead into gold. Think about all the people who studied with painstaking, failure after failure, understanding how a human body worked and how physics happened to make machinery. All of these things were painstakingly revealed, and we're still studying and understanding. how the nature of our planet functions. And those who have studied ecosystems have given us a tremendous amount of insight. The work of E.O. Wilson, the work of Robert Costanza, work of people who've dissected the intricacies of our living systems. It's a wondrous balance that has evolved over thousands and thousands of years. And in 100 years, we've reversed the atmospheric composition to the point that the entire global interconnectedness is shifting to accommodate that change. And we are not. We are not. We're not adapting. We're not shifting. We cannot change that fast. But we can stop harming enough that we can slow it. What is already in the atmosphere, we cannot take out without a great deal of effort. And this, we'll do carbon capture. The most amazing carbon capture is to rebuild the fertility of the ground and stop poisoning it, rebuild the carbon content of the ground by making peat and humus and restore the water cycle. Cool the oceans enough that we don't get these tremendous storms and hurricanes that are just wiping everything, in great swaths. I think we need to be more connected to the real laws of the world that run us and not pretend that we run the world with our own laws, because human laws are flawed. They're not based on reality. And the current initiative don't even collect the data, fire the scientists. This makes zero sense because you've lost your ability to analyze and evaluate what is going on around you. The laws of nature are not negotiable. We are subject to them.
So what is the answer?
Well, you don't have to wonder what works. It's being practiced lots of places all around the world, especially in China, where they're scaling up, especially in parts of Europe and India. Basically, three main courses of action. One, shift from the concept of extracting resources from the earth, using them as rapidly as possible and turning them to trash in order to make the money market go around, and shifting it to the concept of using regenerative practices where what you use is restored, replaced, replenished as you go along. That's the basic concept that has to change. And you do that by shifting to renewable energy sources that can be scaled to every building becomes a power plant. You design for efficiency instead of designing for grandiose structures that can't be sustained. You do regenerative agriculture practice where you restore the fertility of the ground and make it help to capture carbon, but also make healthier food local. You don't have to spend so much on transportation and customize the food culture to the area where you are more and more. It isn't going to be the same, but it will be sustainable. And we have to get to the concept of a circular economy where the things that we make are designed to last and where the things that we use are designed to be reused by design. Instead of saying, how much poison can we tolerate and be okay? Well, you don't experience one chemical at a time, do you? We experience the whole stew of them. And we've never studied the effect of those combination of all of these hundreds of things that we put out into the air and the water. We don't experience them one at a time, but they're regulated one at a time. Why not design things that don't create toxic side effects by design? And then design them to be reused. A circular economy that is benign by design, using bamboo and hemp and mycelium. All kinds of things can be used as feedstocks instead of petrochemicals. I think we have to rethink how we use the resources of the earth, and we have to rethink our way of measuring success. You have to start counting our life support system as a value to be retained and grow.
Yeah.
instead of just the value that we take from extracting, using, and throwing away. We'll be mining our garbage landfills for valuable resources that we've decided were useless. You think about all the electronics that get thrown away. We'll be mining them for gold and lithium and other rare metals. Mountains of things that are piled up.
Yeah. Okay, so it's good to know the answers are out there.
And they're being practiced.
Yeah.
And we were and can be still a leader in the technologies that work. And we can be a leader in the restorative and regenerative economy of the future.
Yeah.
All we need to do is decide that we want to live
Yeah.
and that we want our children to live.
So I'm going to take us back to your website, just because at the end, after we hear about everything that you've done, there's a section called What's Next?
Mm-hmm.
And you are currently working on 2 different projects.
Yes. I thought I was retired, so I had time to write, right? And then I got elected mayor and had to put things on a little bit on a delayed time frame.
Yeah. So I'm not going to read this. I'm going to ask you to explain your 2 projects.
Okay.
So one is about the American Dream Realized. What's that about?
Oh, that's about my family history, my grandfather's story, and what has become of this family that came here. I'm first generation Italian from my father's side. My mother's family fled the Bolshevik Revolution. And so we came here out of desperation, and I have just an amazing family. I mean, my cousins, my brother, my sister, and I think that story is a lot of people's story. But we don't write them down. We don't honor the effort and the sacrifice that they made. And it's evident of what happens when you are really connected to the things that matter. And what matters is the way people treat each other, the community, the helping each other. These are the things that keep us still together today. I mean, when our family gets together, we're always, helping each other, figuring out what we can do, being happy with each other's successes and sharing our sorrows when we lose one. So that to me is something we need to elevate, because that's really that's the glue that makes everything else work,
Right.
So I wanted to lift that up and honor that. And, maybe other people would find it interesting, but
Yeah. And the other project takes us back to Rachel Carson.
Yes.
So talk about that a little bit.
Well, I took my students down to the National Conservation Training Center, to the archives presided over by Mark Madison. And we were looking for some quotes from Rachel Carson for a project that they were doing in class. And one of my students was going through a box that had the conservation bulletins from 1936 in it. That was the first year Rachel Carson worked there. And she had compiled several documents that were published at a time when we were trying to promote domestic food production to release commercial production for the war effort, World War II. And I found recipes that were written and compiled by Rachel Carson. Her name was on the front of these documents.
Oh, exciting.
And it was 51 recipes for woodchuck and rabbit. And then she had fishes from all the different regions of the country. Fishes I never heard of, rosefish, shad, all kinds of things that were unique that I've never heard of. I don't even know if they still swim in the rivers and so forth. But she had recipes for how you prepare them and what you do with them. And, she had salmon recipes for the Pacific Northwest. And so I thought, wouldn't it be cool to see? And then I also found my daughter had a copy of my mother's Victory Garden canning book for canning and preserving from World War II. And so I thought, wow, eating from the garden then and now, because nowadays you have climate victory gardens, which is encouraging people to grow some of their own food. And Phipps, for example, has the homegrown program we have, and they have now 440 homegrown gardens that have been since 2013 established in Pittsburgh. There used to be victory gardens everywhere,
Yeah.
and they were often paved over to make parking spaces for people who used to take the streetcars. Well, we all have gardens of some sort. If you own a house, there's places to plant. People are planting things on their patio pots. They're planting them on their porches in raised beds. So I thought about the contrasts in the timing and also the impact that those 4.7 million victory gardens had on the food production capability of our country in the World War II. 4.7 million Americans growing food of their own, even if it's a little bit. And imagine the impact we could have on the climate situation if we reduced the amount that we buy from production that comes from a long way away, that is packaged and processed and frozen and transported and reshaped into something that has an infinite shelf life. Have you looked at the shelf life on some of this stuff they sell? 3 years? 2 years? And it's supposed to be fresh baked goods? I'm going, what is that makes it last for 2 years? I'm not sure I want to eat this. And you read the list of I used to carry around a magnifying glass to read the ingredients lists. Unpronounceable stuff.
Right.
Chemicals that I probably one time in my life had to study the structure of, but I don't want to eat that, and I now have issues with my body that are not compatible with all these chemicals. So it's hard to go to a thing that isn't pre-prepared and processed and everything. We need to recapture the concept of eating real food and making that available and affordable, because it's good for the planet, but it's also good for us.
Yeah.
So that's that book. That would be Eating from the Garden Then and Now. And I'm not sure what the title will end up being, but that's what the subject matter is. And I have about half of it done, but I've gotten delayed by being mayor. It takes a lot more time than I thought. And I think I was wise to stop teaching this year, because I don't think I could have survived it.
And you're going to be mayor until 2030, right?
I think so, yeah.
Does that mean these books won't
No, I'm
be
going to work on
available
them.
till
I
then?
have my 2 nieces have decided to help me. So Emily DeMarco and Annie Avendolio are going to help me.
Yeah.
Excuse me.
Yeah. Well, as always happens on the show, we tend to run out of time.
We do.
But before we go, I'm going to have you leave the audience with a few words of wisdom, knowing that there are things that they can do as individuals to help the situation, rather than just throw their hands up and say, this is impossible.
I know. Well, the main thing to do is to think first before you buy anything and look at what you use on a daily basis and figure out what you can do yourself. Every little bit helps. So using less energy, eating real food that is minimally pre-processed, and looking at what you use every day, recycling things fine, but when you're buying something, what is its fate? Is this something you can hand down? Is it something you can reprocess, reuse, give over? Buy things that last. Buy things that are made in America that are made to last. And look at, I'm trying to declutter my life. I can't believe how much stuff I've accumulated in 80 years. Okay, a lot of it's books, and I have trouble parting with my books, I must admit. But think about, at the point of purchase, what your profile of the life history of that is. So that's one thing. The other thing, and this is really important, if we're going to preserve a democracy for the next 100 years, for the next 10 years, you need to vote. You need to vote with your heart. You need to vote on behalf of the children who have no voice. Not just the ones that are unborn, but the ones that are here today who are feeling in such despair. And I go to the high schools now as mayor, and they say to me, what's the point? By the time we're old enough to vote, it will all be ruined. There's no point in getting involved. I'm going to just enjoy life while I can because I'm not going to live long. They don't want to have children. That to me is a tragedy that we can avoid and we can avert. But you have to vote. You have to look at people's opinions. You have to have the courage to say we are facing existential crises on climate, on pollution, on loss of diversity of species, and insist that the people who purport to represent us will stand up for the life support system of our planet and for our future of our children. It isn't okay to make money at the expense of people starving. Not over in the rest of the world, but here.
Yeah.
It isn't okay. And it isn't okay to deprive education because it's too expensive or because it's ideologically okay to be narrow and limit who gets to study, who gets to learn, to value the curiosity of mind and the exploration of spirit that comes from education, from a well-rounded reading, from probing the ideas that have shaped the world over time. You know, you don't want to lose that.
Yeah.
And you don't want to limit it to people who can afford to study because they have the time and the leisure. That was the days of the monarchy when the only people who could read and write were the ones who could afford it, or the monks. We need to be aware that our country was built on the concept of everybody has dignity and deserves respect. And we have to vote for people who believe that.
Okay.
So that's where I'll stop.
Well, audience, as always, take what resonates with you and incorporate it into your life and put the rest on the shelf until you're ready to deal with it. And until next time, this has been your spiritual journey.